Hi, and welcome to the Thriving and Surviving podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Markson, and I'm a mum, an entrepreneur, a coach, and most importantly, I'm someone that loves to make waves, break stigmas, and challenge beliefs. Think of this podcast as a wine and cheese night with your besties, sharing your deepest and darkest thoughts and struggles, but also learning a thing or two. So whether you're thriving or just surviving, this podcast is here to enlighten you, heighten you, and most certainly brighten you. So let's dive right in, and I'm so glad you're here. Welcome back to the Thriving and Surviving podcast. I am recording at home today, so I hope you cannot hear the washing machine and the dishwasher that are just cranking. I'm going to be talking about a little bit of an interesting one today, and this came about, I love being inspired by real life situations. So this actually came about from one of my mum's groups. So I've got a couple of different mum groups, and in all of them, to be honest, there is a lot of different personality types. There is a lot of different cultures even. It is such a mixed bag. And to be honest, I kind of love that. I love that it's not super cliquey, like one way or another. So how it all came about, this topic of conversation, and this is actually something that Maddie and I have spoken to between ourselves as well, but about the way that our inner dialogue impacts the way that we perceive the world, essentially. So the situation was that there was an event on at the school, and one of the mums was there, saw one of the other mums, sort of did the eye contacty thing, being like going to say hi, and the other mum was like walked straight past them and like ignored them, did not make eye contact, did not say hello. And the mum that got ignored was pretty offended, which, I mean, rightfully so. I think her response is pretty standard. I think everyone's pretty much been in a situation before where they've gone to say hello to someone and it has not been reciprocated. And it's kind of a bit embarrassing as well, I guess. And it sparked a conversation about it where, people are like, oh my God, it's so rude. That's horrible. Whereas my inner dialogue is a little bit different. And this has been a learned practice. And look, it's not perfect by all means. And I'll give you examples where it absolutely has not been. But for me, when that happens, my first thought is not, oh my God, they've ignored me. They don't want to talk to me. They're being rude to me. Like, my first thought is honestly, maybe they're having a day and like they don't have it in them. And I feel like I've only come to that from last year. Like, last year was so rough that for most of the year, to be honest, I was almost at a point whereas if I bumped into people and they were like, how are you? I would just burst into tears, or I would just be so overwhelmed and overstimulated, pushing to go and do the things that sometimes I would just be like, please don't talk to me, please don't. And I would try and pretend like I didn't see people just to get through. And it was never about me not caring about them or wanting to be rude or not interacting with them. It was just me being in survival mode. And having been on the opposite end of that, now my first thought is when someone doesn't want to engage in a conversation with me, because I am quite a secure person, I am very confident. We'll talk about this too. Maddie loves roasting me about my confidence levels. But I am a very confident, secure person. I know to my core that I'm a good person. And I think that's where it all stems from, because I know to my core that I'm a good person. I try hard. I do everything with the best intentions. I genuinely care about other people. Like, I know what I bring to the table. No matter what table I'm at, I know what I'm bringing, whether it's as a partner, whether it's as a friend. So for me, because I know that I bring all of these great things, my brain is that, well, everyone else is lucky that I'm sitting at their table. And I feel the same way because I really value friendships and partners when I have them. And if they're sitting at my table, I really value them as well. So because I have this like deep-seated confidence, I suppose, my thought process is never like, oh, it's me. Like, they don't want to talk to me. It's like, well, maybe Maybe there is something going on with them. And it's that inner monologue that really shapes the way that I see the world. And it also shapes the way that you see the world. And I know that I've talked a lot in the past about, um, and I've actually got a podcast episode about this, I think, from a year or two ago, talking about the way that we speak to ourselves and the way that that impacts our confidence. And I haven't always been like this either. Like, I've done a lot of therapy, and in my younger years, I definitely felt that I wasn't worthy of love. And there was some like negative self talk going on there. And it's why I got into a lot of these toxic relationships, because a part of me didn't think I deserved better. But once I realized I did, and once I started treating myself kindly and kind of like being my own biggest hype girl internally, I cannot even express the way that my confidence has changed. And this isn't an aesthetic thing, because I actually think like some of the absolute pinnacles of my confidence has been like when I've been postpartum, with my body, ironically, even though that's when I was technically, at my heaviest, almost unfit. But I just was so happy with myself, because I was like, oh my God, my body, like, look what it has just done. Like, this is incredible. And that was my self talk. My self talk was never like, oh, my stretch marks and my rolls and my cellulite. Like, that was not what I focused on. I was like, oh my God, like, it's grown a baby. Like, look, it's making milk. That's insane. It's carrying me around when I'm getting next to no sleep. Like, it is doing 1,000 things that is mind blowing to me. And that was all I focused on, was being like, yes, yes. And that underpinned the way that I viewed myself. And it's not just a physical thing. The same way that I encourage my clients to, hype up their bodies, being like, you know what, like, I have strong legs, or whatever it might be, like beautiful hair, great eyes, whatever those things are that you do to make yourself feel physically confident, do the same thing for your personality. Be like, I'm so kind. Or for me, I'm like, I'm so funny. I'm not actually that funny. Actually, no, I lie. I'm hilarious. Way funnier than Maddie. But things like that, it instills and it reinforces to yourself the different values that you bring to the table. So I know Maddie always just gets very mind blown, and we've unpacked this a lot. She's like, can you give me some of your confidence? Like, I do not understand. And I honestly think I don't like the term fake it till you make it. But in a way, you start with the positive self talk and hyping yourself sort of before you truly believe it. You're like cheering for yourself because you can clock that they're good things. You just haven't really got it to your core where you're like all in yet. But the more that you say it and the more you're like, damn, I'm good at this, or oh my God, I'm such a great friend, the more that you hype that, reinforce that, and you voice that, it starts becoming part of your identity. And I feel like I've honestly gotten to this space now where I genuinely believe that the people that I choose to have in my life are lucky. And that's not I think I'm better than everybody else, because as I said, like, I in turn feel so lucky to be in those people's lives respectively, because they bring so much value and they have all of these incredible qualities, and I feel so grateful that they're willing to put their time and energy into me the same way that I am willing to put my time and energy into them, because at the end of the day, time and energy are the most valuable resources that we have. Money comes and goes, you know, but time, like, nothing gives you more time. Unfortunately, I wish it did. My God, if I could clone myself, life would be easier. So when you're picking the way that you spend your most valuable resources, you're going to pick effectively. And I still remember a long time ago when I used to struggle a little bit with friendships. So I was that person, and Kendall used to hate it, where I would be like, oh my God, I've got a new friend. And she's like, please stop picking up strays. But I just had this like deep seated thing where I was like, I just don't like people being lonely. I don't know, because I don't like being lonely. I hate the idea of someone else being lonely. I also didn't have kids. I had a lot more spare time, where I would put energy and work into people that didn't deserve it. Same as relationships. I would be pouring into people that didn't deserve it. And then I started to get this mindset of, if this was a business decision, would I invest in this? Is this going to generate any return? Is this going to be like a evensies, or is this just going to be like a sieve? Like I'm going to pour into a cup with a hole in the bottom? Because if that was your money, would you invest in something where you were going to lose money? No, you wouldn't. That's silly. So why do we do that with our time and our energy? So once I started thinking a little bit more like that, which might sound a little bit cold maybe, but I'm very business minded. And Maddie actually is trying to channel that at the moment, because I tend to get in situations with a certain somebody where like I just seem to let them walk over me a little bit, and it's someone that is in my life and there's nothing I can do about it. Like they are in my life, and I have to navigate this relationship, and cutting them out of it is not an option. And I just have this like soft spot where I seem to just let them walk over me. And Maddie was like, girl, like we need you to start thinking about this like a business interaction. Like, would you do this? Would you tolerate this? Would you respond like this? Would you be this passive if this was in business as opposed to this person? And I'm like, you, you are not wrong. So I'm going to circle back right to the beginning, because I sort of went off on a little bit of a tangent there. Um, I have two examples where the inner voice that I used to get into my head had me completely misread two situations. Number one, there was this girl, and I was so convinced she hated me. Convinced. I feel like I had bumped into her in the fitness industry multiple times, and maybe I sort of did the whole like, oh, like the nod, like not like a, oh my God, hey, but like the nod, like, yeah, we know each other, we're in the same circles, nod, stone cold. And I was like, ooh, okay. So I just built this whole narrative up in my head that this girl hated me. And we were both from Townsville, which is, a little bit of a smaller town. So I was like, I know you know who I am. Like, I know we know each other, but like, why are you so rude to me? And it was this thing for years. I'm talking this one on for years in my head. And then I actually ended up meeting her in a different situation. Um, and I don't want to let on too much, because I don't want to actually identify who this person was, because I sound ridiculous. And if she was to listen to this, she would be like, you were psychotic. I actually never hated you. You're ridiculous. So I don't just want to let on who it was. But we ended up then like operating in a work capacity together. And she was beautiful. She was lovely. And I had genuinely just caught her on bad days, or she genuinely didn't see me. And just from those little interactions, I had built this entire make believe narrative in my head about by making assumptions. Second time, and this one was not even that long ago. So I am not on a high horse preaching this. This was not that long ago. I was convinced, again, someone else in the fitness industry, I was convinced that he didn't like me. Um, and it was kind of like a little bit of a Chinese whispers thing. And we'd had a couple of client overlaps. Clients of his that had left him and come to me, and I was like, oh, and I'd sort of tried to reach out to be like, oh, like, because normally if my clients leave and go to another coach, which is fine, because I think, if for whatever reason, some sort of coaching dynamic, like if it's not the right fit, like I'm absolutely all for clients to make sure that they click with their coach. And I'm not going to click with everybody. No one clicks with everybody. So I don't lock clients in for periods of time if they're like, oh, like, I feel like I'd rather work with, X, Y, Z. That is so fine. I want you to be in a dynamic where you get the most out of your journey. So I'll normally reach out to the coach and be like, hey, like this client of mine, such and such, is going to move over to you. Obviously with the client's approval, like I'll send them like all the back data. So they've got all of this extra stuff to like know how the body responds to things, what we've done up until this point, and I will give a handover to the next coach. So I'd sort of like reached out to them, got nothing back, and I was like, oh, okay, like maybe they're a little bit pissed that this has happened. But again, my narrative, rather I'm making assumptions that they're, rather than thinking like, oh, like maybe they're just really busy, maybe this isn't part of their process, not a drama. Nope. I went, nope, they obviously hate me. Like they are annoyed. And I built this narrative. And then I kept being in these social situations where they were there. And I was like, he doesn't speak to me. I feel like he gives me the cold shoulder. And then it was actually, like I said, somewhat recently. And I told Maddie about this whole thing, this whole dynamic that I had built up in my head. And then she was there, he was there, and someone else was there. And it was this conversation. And then after, she pulls me aside and she is like, Amanda, you are the problem. And I was like, oh, excuse me, how am I the problem? And she's like, it's not him. She's like, hey, you have the worst resting bitch face. And she is not wrong, because I'm really working on it. I really am, because I want to come across approachable. But for whatever reason, especially when my Botox is not done, this is my face. It doesn't just look like a resting, it looks judgy. It is like, for those of you that are listening, I demonstrated my resting bitch face, but I do happen to just sit in that. And she's like, you were giving him this like terrible expression, and then you turned your back and you were talking to someone else, and he actually went to try and like talk to you a couple of times, and you just ignored him talking to someone else. And I didn't even notice that I did it. I just was in the zone, like speaking to somebody, and like, she's like, I don't think he has any issue with you. I think you have just read into these things the wrong way. But if I was him, I would be reading into how you acted. And I was like, maybe you are onto something. And then we bumped into them again. Like, this is after she'd raised it with me. We bumped into them again. But we were in the middle of doing something. And I get very like tunnel vision. I think we were doing steps. We're in prep. So I'm like, we're trying to get steps. And then we bump into them again. And she's sort of like chatting. And I'm like, oh, when there's time crunch, like steps. So I'm sort of like trying to like edge away to get these steps. And she was like, that was a perfect opportunity for you to have like this conversation. And instead you were like trying to escape. And I was like, perhaps I am the problem. So then once I'd obviously had this pointed out to me, I have since bumped into that person multiple times. And each time I've made the effort to go up and be like, hey, like this conversation, and they're nice as back. And I'm like, oh. And it just goes to show, one, this is kind of split into two parts, to be honest. It goes to show, one, how dangerous our inner self-talk can be, and the way that it kind of oozes into our perceptions of other people and the perceptions of the interactions we have with other people. And then the second part is the danger that comes with making assumptions. And normally I'm not that girl, to be honest. Normally, if I'm picking up a vibe or something from someone, I will normally just, my anxiety doesn't do uncertainty. So normally if I'm like picking up that someone's feeling a certain kind of way at me, I'll just be like, hey, like, is everything all good? Something happened, like, do we need to talk? But when it's sort of like that outer layer, like not like my inner people, but like that outer layer. And honestly, these days when I'm just so tired and time poor, I just think like, I don't have the energy for it. I don't. So it means there's things that I don't address, but then if they're in the back of my mind festering, that's where I can create these entire delulu scenarios that aren't actually factual and they aren't actually real. So I want to challenge everybody listening that when these situations come up, and they come up for everybody and they come up regularly, I want you to take a step back and just think, am I making an assumption? Is it based on fact, or is this just an opinion? And what sort of inner dialogue is happening in the background that has led me to making it? Because if it's negative, that's something that you can take away and you can work on. Or maybe they're horrible. I don't know. It could go either way. But I think being able to take that step back, reflect, and know the difference is so important for developing new relationships and for maintaining old ones. So I'm going to wrap that up right now. But I love that you all tuned in. Love that you came to listen. If there's ever, and this was like one of my mum friends, so this came as a topic in the group, circling all the way back to the beginning. When this discussion came up and I gave my opinion, they were like, you should talk about this on a podcast, because that is like, we've never thought about it like that. I was like, excellent.